On this episode, we discuss our changing attitudes toward counterfeit goods and what role Thailand played in our evolution.
So if you've ever strolled through a Thai market and been tempted to pay $5 for an $800 computer program, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, this be the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 in search of an elephant tusk talisman to go with my beaver tail pendant, and decided to stick around and learn a thing or two when I realized that trading in ivory is bad, Ed. It's bad.
No doubt about that. And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract almost 20 years ago. And I fell in love with explaining to Thai people that not all white people are rich, Christian, or English teachers.
True that.
We want to say a quick thank you to one of our patrons, Eric Munn, who supports us at the show shoutout level. Stick around after we're done talking about how Thailand changed our perception of counterfeit products and how our minds have been mostly changed back, to hear why Eric is a badass warrior for truth, although we're going to leave justice and the American way to Superman. Before we start, a huge thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our regular show a day early, behind-the-scenes photos and videos of our interviews, discounts on swag, which you can find on our website, and various other things that aren't available to regular listeners. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and random topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about how we are now finally starting to get junk text messages after checking in with the Thai Chana app, how Thai temples and businesses are not allowing foreigners inside right now, and how you can now be fined up to 50,000 baht for posting a photo of beer on social media, and how the curfew is finally going to be lifted. To become a patron, head to bangkokpodcast.com/support.
We covered a lot of ground in that bonus show. A lot going on.
Yes, we did. A lot of stuff happening this week.
Thankfully, not most of it was nothing to do about COVID. Oh,
yes.
Finally.
Yeah, true that.
The COVID-free horizon is on the horizon.
We can see it. We can see it coming.
All right. Well, before we jump into it, guys, let's do another book giveaway. A few months back, we gave out a few copies of a book called Working in Thailand, How to Ditch the Desk, Board the Flight, and Land the Job by Patrick Taylor and one of my friends, Karsten Eichholz. Seeing as how there will probably be a lot of people looking for work in Thailand when things eventually do get back to normal, this might be a good resource. So if you are interested, dear listener, send an email to bangkokpodcast@gmail.com with the subject book, and we will pick 4 messages at random and send you this fine tome.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. So on this episode, we are inspired by an article we saw recently on Thisrupt.co, a new website that's putting out some great content on cultural and social issues in Thailand. And the article was written by Ton Lilamanit and describes how Thais are moving away from counterfeit video games and buying the real deal. So this got us to thinking about our own views on counterfeit products, how living in Thailand for us essentially devalued the perceived value of things for many years, and how a number of things, including technology, economics, and even a visit to the Bangkok Counterfeit Museum, have sort of helped swing us back around again to the view that paying for legit gear is usually better than saving on the fake ones, despite being surrounded by fake gear whenever you go out to one of the ubiquitous Thai markets.
Right.
So Ed, what's your thoughts on this whole counterfeit thing?
Well, I think it's a fascinating topic. You know, I've got a long history with this. It's strange. I remember being a kid in the States in the 70s and being kind of a computer nerd. I had a Commodore 64, right? Nice. And I remember as a kid, there were hacks and counterfeit games. So I bought some games legitimately, but we also were passing around hacked, like Commodore 64 games, like in the early days. And I remember when I went to university, I started out as a computer science major, and then subsequently dropped that when it got hard. But I remember like one of my professors just going on this rant about how wrong it was to like copy software. And, I had grown up by then. I wasn't a kid anymore. So I remember thinking like, yeah, that makes sense. It's like, who would do that? Like, who would ever like copy software? Like,
what kind of jerk would do that?
What kind of deviant kid, and then of course, just my memory in the States is just that I don't remember really having access to counterfeit software. To me, it just wasn't a thing by the time I was an adult. I mean, I know it still existed, but I don't know, like in the States, I don't know. I just always paid for software because that's what everyone else did.
Right, right.
I mean, I guess maybe there was some underground stuff going on, or maybe on message boards or stuff. But I don't know. Like, to me, it was, I did it as a kid, and I just grew out of it. But then I moved to Thailand.
Right.
And it's like, and then when I came to Thailand, I brought all my Western values. And when I saw all the, pirated software at like Pantip, I was disgusted by it for about like 3 months.
That long, eh?
Yeah, or I don't even know. I'd have to. It might have been shorter than that. Maybe I'm giving myself too much credit.
Right.
But the bottom line is just like counterfeit software was just so common here, and it's not just like at Pantip. It's just on the street. I just remember like, walking down Sukhumvit or walking down Siloam, and there's just tables, and they just have counterfeit software.
Yeah.
And so I don't remember when. I hope I lasted at least a few months, but I just started buying it because it's cheap. It's like. It's like you could get a full, you could get like Adobe Photoshop for like $5 instead of $600.
Yeah, exactly. And my experience was similar to yours. And take expanding the focus from software, which is a huge part of this too, to other things too, like fake fill in the blank. It just wasn't a thing for me growing up. Like if you really tried, you could probably get your hands on it, but there's no markets you can go to in Canada to buy fake gear. Not that I know of anyway, in my little town.
Sure.
So yeah, moving here and it's suddenly you're like, oh, it's everywhere. Like it's so easy and everyone's doing it. And of course, I moved here when I was 26. I was a young punk, so I didn't really have the mental capacity. I'm sure a lot of people do at 26. I didn't to sort of tumble over these complicated ethical and moral questions in their mind. I never bothered with that. I just dove right in. So it very quickly becomes de rigueur, like just the way it's done. Why would you pay for the real thing when you can get another thing for, a fraction of the price?
That's right. And, the thing that drives me, again, you and I have talked about this many times. What drives me crazy about Thailand is that there's something that's supposed to be illegal, like counterfeit software, but then it's just so common, and it's just obviously the police are not enforcing the law, or maybe the cops are getting paid off. It's just hard to feel like it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's like the cops are the ones that are supposed to kind of tell you what's wrong. And so when there's just tables of software or DVDs all over the place, it really does break down what, like, or it I don't know what the right word is. It's just like, at least in my case, it just changed what I cared about or what I valued.
Right.
It's just, 'cause it's just so prevalent, and the cops are doing nothing about it. And, everyone I knew was doing it. I mean, I'm not defending it as in I think I did the right thing. I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to explain it. But I did get sucked in. I just got sucked in. And
yeah. And after a while, like you said, it took you 3 months, but however long it takes, it's not a lot of time passes before that's just the way the world works, and you're totally on board with this. And it's funny. I remember thinking back. I was at my ex-girlfriend's place at the time, years ago. This was 16 years ago now, and I remember we were watching Sex and the City, and there was a show where Samantha, which is me. I mean, you're totally a Charlotte head, but I'm a Samantha.
Gee, thanks.
But she was, the whole show, her plot of the show was how there was some guy selling fake Hermes bags out of the trunk of a car in New York.
Oh, okay.
And it was like a really big deal. And I was like, is that really a big deal? Is that enough to like base this major television show plot point around? And it hit me that like, yeah, the rest of the world doesn't work, at least Western countries don't work like we're used to them working in Thailand. And I for some reason it stuck with me, and it made me realize like, oh, this is unusual. This thing that has now become normal is really unusual for the culture that I grew up in.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good, this topic is just a good topic in general because it shows the way you and I were changed by living in Thailand.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
I think we absorbed, and I don't mean to speak for you, but you already said it, but I think, the bottom line is there's some bad things about Thai culture, which is not respecting intellectual property.
Right.
This is a bad thing. I believe in intellectual property. But in Thailand, it's just not respected. And at least, you and I are confessing. This is like a confessional that we just, it's like, I just got sucked in. I started to do as the locals do.
Same.
I think for many Thai people, you're just a fool if you pay full price.
Yeah. And, I felt like a bit of a hypocrite, and I totally acknowledge this. I felt like a total skeezix because, years ago, back in the day, I was working as a writer, and I would write a story, and I would give it to a magazine, and I'd be like, all right, now you owe me money because that's my stuff. I made that, so now I get money. Meanwhile, right. I'm on Ceylon looking for, like Jean-Jacques Annaud counterfeit DVDs because they're hard to find in the store.
Right.
And I'm like buying this counterfeit stuff, and I realized that, and I knew that I was being kind of a fraud, and I was like, well, that's just the way it is. But it just wasn't something that I turned over in my head any more than that, because like you said, everyone was doing it. It's everywhere. No one cares. So
right.
It just becomes the way it is.
Yeah, it's interesting how, and I know this is kind of the next thing you want to talk about, but it is interesting how I kind of changed over time. It's like, so like over time, for various reasons, I just started doing it less and less. Like, so I would like to say that I had a change of heart. I realized I was making a mistake. I grew some integrity, but I'm not sure that's what it was. It's like, I'm not sure what it was. It's like, so what I found out, like using like counterfeit software, is that a lot of times it's buggy, or, it's like you're getting hassled, like the bottom line is, like, a lot of times in the long run, it's like counterfeit software is just a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what happened over time, I mean, I don't really know the timeline, but over time I did just start doing it less and less. And God, it's been a long time. I mean, I'm happy to say, yeah, I don't know. It's been a really long time. And so to me, it's just it's just off the table. I wouldn't. So it's funny now. I've kind of reverted back to my old attitude. I would never use pirated software. I just maybe I just grew up. I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm kind of back to my old attitude. Yeah, me too. And there are three reasons why I think I'm back to my old attitude. Because I've thought about this a lot, and one of them is just getting older, and I have more money now than I did. I mean, it's not so much. Maybe that's it, right?
That when I was 26, and I'm like, oh yeah, like 1,000 baht for this software. Like, yeah, I'll do that. That's fair, because I know I'm getting the real software. And right. Back when we started the podcast, actually, I used to edit it on a pirated copy of, oh God, I can't remember, Logic or one of these things. And dude, I would get like an hour into editing the show, and it would crash and lose everything. It happened so many times, and I was so frustrated. But I was like, I really should buy the real software here.
Right.
But I never did, but that was sort of helping to push me back towards the way I used to think in Canada. And the third thing, other than sort of like getting older and wiser and my bad experience with pirated software, was actually, I actually wrote a story for CNN years ago on the Tilakey and Gibbons Museum of Counterfeit Goods, which I don't know if you've ever been to.
It's funny because so Greg is talking about a pretty well-known law firm in Thailand, and they're well-known for intellectual property law. So I've actually been to that law firm, and I think I did walk through that like mini museum they have. But why don't you tell the listeners about it?
Yeah, well, Tilakey and Gibbons, T&G, like you said, they're like a huge, really well-known law firm, and they've got a big building on Rama 3, or they're in a big building. It's not their building. But they've got this museum, and basically, I went to write this story for CNN, and this was back in 2011. And I walked through this museum, and it's really nicely done. It's not very big; it's just like 2 or 3 little rooms together in this sort of corner of the law firm. But there is so much stuff there that they've confiscated. Not them, but that they've got access to because they're an intellectual property firm. But, you know, it really kind of opened my eyes, and I was like, you know, I don't really care. To be honest with you, I don't really care if someone buys like some copy Adidas sneakers, or, you know, or like buys a t-shirt with a fake logo on it. You know, like, I think that's pretty low on the scale of like harming people, you know. But then you scale it up a little bit, and if that's okay, well, then where do you stop? Like, what would you do if your girlfriend bought fake birth control pills? Or would you fly home? Would you fly home on an airplane if you knew that like the brakes were made in some backyard lab in Vietnam?
Right,
you know?
Of course, sure.
You know, and there's a lot of examples of those kind of things, like fake medicine, stuff that people rely on to save lives and keep them safe. Like, that's when it starts to get like,
Yeah, no, it's definitely wrong. I don't have any doubt about it, that it's actually wrong, and I guess I've come around for whatever the reason is. But I do think it is a somewhat complicated question, or I should say this. I would say pricing of goods is a complicated question when you look at the different standard of living and the average salary of people in different countries. I think the companies have gotten much better about this by having like localized pricing methods. In other words, like back in the day, the software just cost the same everywhere in the world. And so for most Thai people, it was just absurd. You know, it's like the price of Photoshop was just absurd.
Yeah.
For 98% of Thai people, it was just literally a joke. And so, you know, Thai people just didn't even blink an eye about pirating it. But I think that has changed somewhat. And, you know, it's not just pricing. I think companies have gotten smarter about having like trial periods, or like you can try the software for 30 days. And I think this was a smart move, because when I think back about the times that I bought pirated stuff, a lot of times it was just to try the software. It was my curiosity. Like, I'm okay, well, that program looks cool, and so I buy a copy of it. But most of it I never used that much. But there was no, like 15 years ago, you couldn't get a trial copy. You know, or it wasn't a thing. But now I think the companies have gotten much smarter about giving people, or, you know, it's either a trial period or maybe giving you limited functionality, you know, something like that. So I think the situation has gotten better for many reasons.
And I think along those lines as well, you have companies like when you talk about buying fake DVDs or books or whatever, like this is something that people who were pirating and buying counterfeit stuff years ago were saying, like, look, drop the price, make it more affordable, and make it easy, and we'll pay. So that's a big thing for me too, is because like I'm not going out to buy a DVD for $25 or whatever it is, but I'll pay for Netflix for $15 a month.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think these subscription services have significantly reduced piracy, because it's just, you know, what's the point when you can subscribe to Netflix or HBO Go or whatever and get access to it? So I don't know. It's a tricky question. I mean, I think, you know, I think you can't defend piracy except for thinking about the different standards of living. Like, so for you and I, like, you know, even though you and I weren't making a lot of money, we probably were making money even back then more than most Thai people were, you know?
Yeah, right.
So you and I, we have no excuse. But for like the average Thai person, I don't know, like maybe back in the day they did have an excuse, you know?
Yeah, you know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to say, well, you know this. How much is Photoshop now?
Well, now it's a subscription service, and now there's like this Adobe Cloud. So I think for $10 a month, you can get, I think you can get Photoshop and Lightroom. I think they have a photographer's package. I think it's like $10 a month.
Yeah, see, that's just a bit over 300 baht a month. Like, that's still out of the price range for a lot of Thai people. But you could also probably argue that anyone who can't afford that probably doesn't need to be working in Photoshop anyway. Right. But that's a much more accessible plan than saying this is $1,500 or whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole debate about those subscription services, and I think for a lot of people, they hate it because they know they're going to end up paying more in the long run. But the advantage of those subscription services is, you don't have to pay forever. So it's and instead of having to come up with $600 to use Photoshop. You just have to come up with $10 a month.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of pros and cons to that subscription model, but it probably does reduce piracy.
Yeah. And and as we're wrapping up, the one thing that I thought was interesting, this was probably about 8 years ago now. I had amassed over my early years here, I'd amassed quite a collection of pirated DVDs that I bought on some markets somewhere. And I had some legit DVDs too, but a lot of them were hard to find, stuff that you couldn't get in the stores, because back then it was much more difficult to find, your favorite Western movies and stuff here. But I remember at the point where like I got easy access to a streaming service, like this huge binder of DVDs I had became almost instantaneously worthless to me.
That's right. That's exactly
this thing that I had spent countless hours traipsing over Bangkok, sweating, organizing, curating, and keeping safe, suddenly became like, I don't need this. This is garbage.
Yeah, it's so funny. How things like that change. I remember back in the day, a friend of mine was telling me that her dad had videotaped like a whole bunch of TV shows for years, and that their basement was just filled with stacks of videotapes of his favorite TV shows. And the bottom line is, like, I don't know what shows they were. I guess some of them might not be available, but probably some of those shows are just available on some streaming service now. So
right.
So decades of him diligently putting a tape in his VCR and copying all the stuff is now pointless because you just have access to it online.
Yeah. It's like, you probably could get really angry about that, but at the same time, you're like, well, I can still watch them. And they're better quality, but it's a lot of wasted time on my part.
For sure.
That's funny. So as we're getting closer to the end here, let's bring it back around to the computer game thing, because that's what this really good article on Thisrupt started with. But, I've used to be a big gamer, and I recently got back into it. But another point that this article makes is that computer games, for instance, just the other day, I pre-ordered The Last of Us Part 2, just an incredible game.
Right.
The first one, Last of Us, is just an incredible game for the PlayStation. And it was like $65. But I'm going to play that probably 100 hours, over the next several months.
Right.
So that's a pretty good return on investment per hour.
Yeah, I agree. So it's like so some of that pricing for ties can seem high, but that article made a good point, like you said, that if you divide the number of hours by the cost, it's actually a pretty good deal.
Yeah, very good. Video games are an interesting one too, because actually, the video game industry, it like dwarfs film and television. It's just such a massive industry. So it's a good sort of jumping off point for this issue.
Yeah, I mean, anything that makes it easier for ties to see the value in actually paying is a good thing, because I don't want to be too hard on Thailand. I think it's true in other parts of Asia as well. China is kind of notorious for not respecting copyright, especially Western copyright. So I think anything that moves Asian culture towards respecting copyright and intellectual property is a good thing.
Yeah, I would agree. I do have some maybe this is not such a big deal, but overall, I think it's probably a good policy. Like, as you get older, you realize that generally speaking, you get what you pay for. And
yes, I agree.
I think we've both gone through enough difficult times with crappy products that we tried to save a few bucks on, and at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. So.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to think about. Like, when we first came here, Thailand, being in Thailand completely switched the way we think about this very important issue 180 degrees. But over the years, with the advent of technology, and as we've gotten older, and how Thailand has sort of opened up now to become a place where you can get almost everything that you can in any other country in the world, we've rotated back 180 degrees to where we were when we first got here.
That's right. I think so. I think that, that's pretty much what's happened with me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. Well, let's get into Love, Loathe, or Live With, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. And this week it is over to you, sir.
All right, Greg. So imagine you're in a taxi. You've gone on like a long taxi ride, and you come to a stop. It's time to pay the bill, and you go to look at the meter to see how much you have to pay. And the meter is totally obscured by some stuff hanging from the roof of the taxi, such that there's no way for you to determine what you owe. And the taxi driver is just sitting there waiting for you to pay.
Yeah, that's happened many times. Yeah.
Isn't it annoying? I mean, so this is one that you can't love. You cannot love that.
Right. Yeah. It's not like, yeah, I love not knowing how much I have to pay. Yeah, I mean, it's just live with. I don't really think about it that much. I'm going to say live with on this one because you'd think of all the implements in the taxi, the one that you would want to have the most visible is the meter.
Yeah, no, I'm going to, this drives me crazy. I loathe this. And, listeners, what I'm saying is that Thai taxi drivers will have like decorations that obscure the meter.
Right.
So it's like you can't see what the meter is, so you don't know what to pay. So and a lot of times they're just sitting there waiting for you to pay, and I'm sitting there, and so my thing now is just to wait and do nothing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So my thing is like,
it bugs you that much?
Oh, it drives me crazy. I'm like, just move this shit. Like, it's like it'll be like, seashells hanging from the roof of the taxi that hang in front of the meter.
Yeah, I guess so. Although maybe, I mean, you're maybe like 6 inches taller than the average Thai person who sits in the back and can see the meter just fine.
Maybe it's an angle. Yeah, maybe it's an angle thing.
Yeah, you big galoot.
Yeah, sometimes it's like partially obscured and I'll lean over, but it's really surprising how many times the meter is just blocked. And it's, how many times a day does it happen? Like this is a pet peeve of mine when I encounter. If you see a problem like in a place of business, it doesn't always bother me that much because it's normal for there to be problems. But what bothers me is when I see a problem that I know must be repeated over and over again and it's not being fixed.
Yeah, I'll give you that. But this is not a big deal for me. I just sort of breeze through it and go, I wish I could have seen that a bit easier.
You're a far more reasonable man than I am, apparently. I guess it's because you're Canadian. Probably.
Sorry about that.
All right, I'm going loathe.
All right.
Obscured taxi meters, loathe.
Hard loathe from Ed.
All right, so as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to Eric Munn for lending us his support at the show shoutout level. Greg, what did you find out about Eric?
Well, as it turns out, Eric is our most stubbornly quiet patron to date, Ed. Check this out. I sent him 3 emails. Didn't hear anything back. So, Eric, if you're out there, man, I had to do some digging. I hope you don't mind that I dug up this little bon mot of information. So, with a name like Mun, I figured Eric might be Chinese or Korean, of Chinese or Korean descent. But according to the internet, where, as you know, Ed, all information is factually accurate.
Of course.
Yeah, Mun is actually an Irish name.
Wow.
Ported over from Normandy after the Norman conquest in 1066.
Wow.
So our buddy Eric might be a big Irish lad. Maybe he's holding a glass of Guinness as he listens to this. Who knows?
Who knows? We don't know.
Yeah, so I checked out their family crest, the Mun family crest, and it's a nice black and yellow affair with it's got like a knight in there and a couple of swirly little things, and it's got a castle, which is very Irish. And I'm gonna turn this into a little bit of a quiz to see how much you can figure out about our friend Eric. The motto of his family, which is on the family crest of the Mun family, is Omnia Vincit Veritas. Do you know what that means?
Well, I know Omnia is everything, and I know Veritas is truth, but I don't really know Vincent though.
Vincent?
Seeing the truth in everything? I don't know.
Pretty good. We're getting into the weeds here, but that's pretty good. Way better than I would have done. Actually, Omnia Vincit Veritas means truth conquers all things.
Oh, conquers all things. Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great, I love it. I love that expression.
Yeah, I think it's cool. So, Eric, if you are true to your family crest, at least what I think is your family crest, according to the all-powerful internet, you are probably a warrior for truth, my friend, and we like people like you supporting the show. We like to have you on our side. But like we said in the beginning, you're the truth guy, but we'll leave justice and the American way to Superman, and you just take care of the truth. And you can be the Bangkok podcast truth agent or something like that. You can be our official guy of truth.
All right, man.
The
Thank
voice
you, Eric.
of truth. Yeah, thanks for your support, man. We appreciate it. Check your email. Maybe you got it. So maybe it's in the spam or something like that. I don't know. Sometimes if we send it out from Patreon directly, it goes to spam. So check that out. And send us a message. Tell us you're out there and alive and well and drinking a good Guinness.
All right. A final thanks to our patrons who help keep the show ad-free. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Right on. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can chat with us on the Line app or even reach out to me directly on Twitter if you want, where I am BKK Greg. So thank you for listening, everyone. Stay safe, wash your hands, and we will hopefully see you in the real world and online very soon.
True that. Cool. Very cool.
But anyway, so he's learning solids, liquids, and gas, and I defaulted, and I really wanted to explain it to him in a way that a kid could understand. So I defaulted into farting, peeing, and pooing, and like he got it immediately.
Dude, that might come out in class someday. He
Dude,
might be like,
today on the computer on the thing with his teacher, she was asking her, like, she's like, okay, so what's a solid? And he was like, wood, a table, a computer. And she's like, yes, okay, what's a liquid? He's like, milk, orange juice. She says, what's a gas? And he goes, daddy's farts.
Did he say that?
And the teacher bust out laughing. She laughed for like a minute.
Daddy's farts? That is
farts.
Hilarious, dude. Dude, you should have told that story on the podcast. That is
I'm going to put
funny.
this on the end of the podcast.
That is so damn funny.
Daddy's farts.
I love it.
But I mean, what else is there? There's like air.
That's one of those.
That's
like
kind of it, right? You can't
that's one
say,
of those kids say the cutest things. That's one of those like
right.
Memes,
but you can't really say like noble gases, oxygen, nitrogen. You like
yeah, right. Yeah, what is a kid going to say?
Yeah,
carbon monoxide.
Exactly.
That kills you when you.
Like, which also kill you when you breathe.
Okay. Daddy's farts. I love it.
Okay.